Okay, coming up next, we have Dylan Jones. Dylan is a cybersecurity leader with a background in digital forensics, incident response, and security engineering. In his role, he focuses on driving cyber resilience while promoting the importance of technical innovation, secure by design architecture, and he is deeply passionate about security research and education. He also serves on the Starlight Children's Foundation Digital and Data Advisory Board. And in his spare time, Dylan is a maker and breaker of all things open source. So Dylan is presenting on Ready Player 3, his Trawling Telegram for Threat Intelligence. So can we please give Dylan a massive warm round of applause as he comes on. Thank you.
Awesome. G'day, everybody. My name is DJ, Dylan, whatever you want to call me. I promised for this year I wouldn't spend 45 minutes pacing up and down the stage, but let's be honest, at about minute 20 that'll become a lie anyway. So why are you here? I went down a bit of a rabbit hole about 12 months ago with some research. And what started as I'm looking for exploit code for a particular vulnerability that was released on Telegram and not GitHub like every other respectable adversary, it led me to a very, very deep and dark rabbit hole, which we're going to get to. A little bit about me. I've done a lot of different things. What I can tell you is the 15 minutes spent generating that image with Gemini was probably the most intimidating of my life. So I've worked in the cybers for the better part of about 10 years now. Across engineering, security research, incident response, architecture, and I've landed where I am today. As people can attest to, I basically herd cats for a living and build cool things. So before we kick off, the 3 takeaways that I want you guys to take away today are understanding what adversaries and what they're doing on Telegram and how they're using it. I want you to understand the type of information and data that Telegram contains. And I want you to understand, and what I should, if I do my job properly, you should be able to take away something practical and turn it into something actionable and something that you can hunt with. I also want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. So yes, this is a cybersecurity talk, and we are going to be talking about some cybersecurity things. We're also going to be talking about some really ugly things, like non-consensual intimate imagery and child exploitation. So if that is a bit too much for you, just please take that as the disclaimer. A little bit of a history lesson about Telegram. So Telegram, we have to look, to understand Telegram, we've got to look at its founder, Pavel Durov. Now, Pavel initially rose to fame as what I'd like to call the Mark Zuckerberg of Russia. And what he did was in the early 2000s, during the big dot-com boom, he founded a Russian social media site known as VK. And the reason that this is important, and I'm giving you guys a little bit of a history lesson, is because what I'm going to explain and the things that we're going to go through will basically tell you why Telegram was founded. And so in 2011, some of you might remember, I was still a young ankle biter myself. In 2011, there were big Russian protests and mass civil unrest in Russia based on rigged elections. Again, I'm not an intel analyst, nor am I some foreign correspondent, but I probably could have told you that it might have been rigged. And what ended up happening is they being protesters and groups of people, were using VK to go and incite violence and set up and organize these protests. And one afternoon, Durov gets a knock at his door, and it's the Russian FSB, which for those that don't know, it's the Russian Secret Service or the Federal Security Service. And they basically went, Durov, you will give us all of the information that you have on everybody that's interacted with these groups of people. You will give us the information, personal identifiable information on all of their contacts. Oh, and you're also going to take down the people, our foreign politicians and our opposition. And so, as the adage goes in Russia, if you don't cooperate with the Kremlin, you disappear. And so, to Durov's word, he gave them the finger and developed Telegram. Now, Telegram, when you look at all of the research and all of the presentations that Durov gave, Telegram was founded around 3 core principles. A secure way to communicate that was not easily accessible or was able to be intercepted by the prying eyes of, say, the Russian FSB or the GRU. He wanted to develop a platform that no single government around the world could control. So again, being in Russia, founding a company in Russia, if the Russian government want to take you offline, they will, right? And then he also wanted to develop a platform whose founder, i.e. himself, was not for sale. So building a platform that was not going to go public, that at the behest of shareholders and people with external influence. And so if you look at Durov, like all of that is actually quite admirable, wouldn't you agree? Very privacy focused, very big on freedom, as am I, and obviously the focus of those principles are why Telegram exists. Now, something that some people may find, I guess, controversial is Telegram is adversary infrastructure. And I'll just leave that there for a second. Have a think about everything that I've just said and try and tell me why, or think to yourself, why is Telegram adversary infrastructure? This is just a literal couple of links that I put together, right? Of the negative things in the media and the things that are going on Telegram and the activities going on Telegram that are happening right now. 2 stick out, based here locally and at home. And that is number 1, the AFP last year setting up a strike force to target extremism ideology from terrorist groups and other unsavoury groups running on Telegram and Discord and Reddit. Our e-safety commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, who I believe does some absolutely incredible work, was consistently, time after time, getting rejected from the takedown request of child sexual abuse material. So when you look at these things, as recent as the last couple of months, the Iranian government used Telegram for C2 infrastructure, right? This isn't the world according to DJ, this is the world according to the Australian Federal Police and the FBI and Reuters and Al Jazeera, like not just some dude with a mic, right? And so if I was to basically have a look at the 13 years of history of Telegram, it started off as a direct point-to-point messaging app. It introduced features like the distribution of messages through channels, one-way communication channels, bots for automation. But the pivotal point was in 2024 when Durov was arrested in France, because he's a French citizen. And why was he arrested, you might ask? Well, he wasn't responding to takedown requests for child exploitation material. He wasn't taking down terrorist extremist ideology. And in 2025, coincidentally, I'm not going to say he sold out because I'm DJ with a mic, but if you look at it, Telegram, for the first time in its history, changed its privacy policy. They had a policy of never handing information or data over to law enforcement of any country. And they started handing over mobile numbers, IP addresses, payment details if you subscribe to things through the app. And there is a reason I'm going on this big 10-minute rant, and we're going to get into that now. We're going to look at some of the types of content on Telegram, unsavoury and stuff that we can here collectively use from a cyber threat intel perspective. Number 1 is your run-of-the-mill e-criminals. As part of the keynote, Ivano made reference to the fact that a certain CMS provider recently paid a very big ransom. I wouldn't know anything about that. And to prevent their content from being shared online. So we see that time and time again. You don't pay, we're going to start spraying it out. There's nation state and terrorist networks operating on Telegram, as I've touched on, right? They disseminate information and misinformation through these channels. They recruit people. Russia was recruiting Ukrainians and Ukrainians were recruiting Russians as part of the unrest that occurred in 2022. And the third is the groups of those individuals who share non-consensual intimate imagery, as well as child exploitation material or other exploitation material. And an anecdote that I can provide on that is last month the CNN raised and performed an investigative piece on activities that were occurring on Telegram in this space. And they dubbed it Rape Universities. Disgusting to hear about the things that are going on Telegram, but it drives home the fact that you've got news outlets around the world reporting on the same abhorrent content that we see on a daily basis. So why do they choose it, right? It's anonymous. Well, technically, it kind of was up until the start of last year, right? When they started handing over those pieces, all those breadcrumbs, right? Moderation is low. So the removal of content, if Telegram removed their content, they removed their engagers. Doesn't matter what you're doing, the engagement levels drop. You have an immediate reach through the clicking of a single link. I can join a Telegram group that has access to tens of hundreds of thousands of other links, and I can start spiderwebbing out, and I will show you. And the tradecraft of adversaries, when you look at what they need to get their goals, to basically perform their goals on target, they need to be able to go and use some kind of tooling. And Telegram has that there. So that brings me to the next question of, what does Telegram have? And you're probably thinking, oh shit, DJ, who would have thought that there's information on Telegram? We're going to go through and I'll explain why it's important and what you as cyber threat intel practitioners, as SOC analysts, as forensicators and law enforcement can use. You have source information. So that is information on the groups and channels and direct communications. You've obviously got message content, right? So that's what is being sent. And you've also got information on the users that are using the platform. Now, if I was to dive into the channels and groups, right? This is, and I apologize, it's a little bit blurry, and I'll get my big head out of the way. This is a real export of a data leak monitoring channel on Telegram. Basically, you go there, you subscribe, and they just send you notifications every time something new is detected. But you can see information that we get is through the title. We get information on the metadata of the dates, membership information. So for example, I can see exactly who was on the particular group or who was part of the group and at what time. Forum topics. Now you might be thinking, hold on, there's just groups and channels, DJ. What are you talking about? Well, there's technically forums, so similar to Slack, similar to Teams, similar to Reddit, I can set up a group and I can have sub-channels or forums as Telegram calls it. And if you think about it from the perspective of, I'm tracking an adversary that I know disperses information based on organizations in the educational sector. They might have University A, University B, University C as forums, and just through the message content, without needing to open Telegram, I can log in and see exactly what they're doing and where they're sending it. We can also go through from a message and content perspective. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So some of the content that you'll see being collected on Telegram and that we can collect and that you guys can collect right now is sender metadata, right? So who sent a message from A to B, right? What content is available? So did they send an image or a file? Was it a JSON document with credentials? Was it an image of something unsavory? The third one, which I am going to touch on, is the entity information. Because Anki Durov has made our job as cyber professionals so much easier. Telegram automatically extracts entities for us. And what is an entity? Well, that is anything. That could be a URL, a domain, an IP address, hashtags, user mentions, different font, emojis used. There's a list of about 15 individual things that the Telegram API automatically parses for us. So as intel analysts, as cybersecurity professionals, it makes it so much easier for us to dig out information that matters when messages are sent. But in addition to that, We've also got like reactions on messages. How many times has somebody viewed a message? What are they reacting? Was it a love heart? Was it a fingers down emoji? Because you can also, I don't have to explain basic sentiment analysis to this cohort, you can kind of see what content, what illegal content is getting the upvotes or the downvotes or the get it out of here because it's too much for us. And then obviously you get the forum topic destination as well. And lastly, you get a lot of information on the user. Now again, who would have thought that Telegram and its API can give us some information about the users that are on the platform? There is a scenario that I'll give you, right? When you pull all of these different pieces of information and mutual contacts from the account that you've got, profile photos, very common. I've got a profile photo on, Discord as an example, very unsavory of me again, but not AI generated this time. But what you can do is if you think about it from an adversary's perspective or a criminal, if I apply the non-consensual intimate imagery perspective, I can do something such as perceptual hashing of a base 64 encoded string so that I'm not saving an image. And I could go and group all of the people that I know of or that I track as part of my Intel repository who has similar, based on the perceptual hashing, and for those that don't know, perceptual hashing is looking at hashing of an image from an actual image perspective. How many times do I see an image of a very similar nature? And I did this for adversaries that were going and selling hacks for Facebook. They were selling hacks for Facebook. And there was a group, based on the research that I've done over the last 6 months, that had 75 accounts, individual Telegram accounts that were in the users tracked that I was able to identify were probably the same person or persons based on the profile information and the subtle changes in the images that they were using. That's one example. Now, I want to dive into a bit of a case study, right? And the case study is the anatomy of a content sharing network. And I did mention that I was going to talk about some, really hard topics. And if you were to draw a Venn diagram around two distinct profiles, cyber threat intelligence and the intelligence of gathering information that I can use for my organization to better protect it, as long as next to a law enforcement graph around catching activities and content from people that I want to go and face justice, there is very, very similar tactics, techniques, and procedures between the two. So for the last 5 months, I've spent researching Telegram groups and the way messages are disseminated throughout different channels, through different groups of individuals. A very common, and 9 times out of 10, a very common way, and the way that this would work, is an adversary or an actor, in this case, they're interchangeable, an actor would create a number of groups. So they'd create 3 groups on Telegram. Group number 1 is primary, the primary group that they're going to share content or links into. Group number 2 is the secondary. And group number 3 was what they call a link sharing group. Because these bastards would go out and start partnering with other criminal groups and sharing links back to their information and their data with other criminal groups or with other individuals that wanted to exchange credentials. So for example, I only have access tokens. All right, well, I sell passwords, okay, let's go and share or trade. And that was one example. What they then do is they mark the group as open. And so once the group is opened, people can start posting content. Now, predominantly, the way that it has been moving in the last 3 of those 6 months are organisations that are being pantsed at the behest of the scattered spiders of the world. Their data is ending up on the dark web, on the normal web, through Telegram. And that's through links that have been obfuscated. So what's happening is they are going through and, say, using a mega link, mega.nz. That's where I'm storing my data. They will run it through a series of URL obfuscation, and link monetization platforms. And I will go through this exact technical step shortly. Or, depending on the group, depending on what it is, they'll just blatantly start the content and start sharing it there. So they'll start dumping JSON files and CSVs of usernames and passwords and access tokens and hit lists for, hey, these are organizations we want to take out. But like think of it literally like a bounty. If anybody can get me a user that's on the help desk at company X, I will give them X number of money, or I will give you a list of passwords that I've never released. It's pretty big. Now, after a period of time, they'll shut up shop. So they'll close the group. Sometimes they'll change the name of it. But 9 times out of 10, they'll close it, they delete all of the content, and they just let it stagnate for an undisclosed period of time. And what that does is that means their content distribution network is still available. So they can start up and do the same shit again tomorrow. So you're probably thinking, well, why are they doing it? And it's because they like money, right? I'm a very bad Mr. Krabs impersonator, so, sue me. They want to do it for money. They're literally doing it for money. And maybe some personal reasons, I don't know. And we'll get back onto that money perspective in a second. So what? Why do we care? Why should you care, right? Well, when you think about the information that it's got from a cyber threat intel perspective, you've got to understand the different groups, right? So that's where I introduce my new company, Intel Pipelines Are Us. And what you can do, and what you should be doing. And if you're not doing this, think about doing this. And if you don't have Intel analysts, get your SOC guys to start, right? Building out your intelligence collection objectives. What information, firstly, what is important to you? What are you trying to protect? What do we need information on, right? Now, full disclosure, I'm not an Intel analyst. I know how to collect information. I've made some determinations based on probabilities. But this is pretty fundamental stuff that everybody can be doing here. Every one of you that has access to Visual Studio Code, PowerShell, can start collecting information. In the context of what I just spoke about and the case study around the information that's being shared, well, you can start going out and observing messages and listening to messages. So you think about it logically, right? If you're in a group in Telegram, or if your intelligence objectives state, we're in the gas and mining industry and we're petrified about somebody popping, our environments and taking out our critical infrastructure. You might be following groups, or I'd hope the Intel organizations and the Intel analysts are tracking groups. And so what I would be doing is starting to observe messages in groups that are known to be run by people targeting those kinds of organizations. And when I say look for and listen to messages, I mean messages that are going in and out of Telegram. How are people communicating in Telegram? Mostly through groups. When I talk about channels, that's a one-way distribution, like I mentioned. So that's run by a person or persons, generally going and providing a one-way method of communication. Through Telegram and through its APIs, you can use listeners to just scrape every single message that your account that you sign up with sees. And what that means is you get the ability to start automatically extracting those entities and doing something with them, right? So, for example, you want to take the URL and you want to do something with it. You could throw it in URL scan, or you could throw it in VT. Understand do basic statistical analysis around, are we seeing these types of activities or URLs or domains or IP addresses or email addresses in our own intelligence collection? And then depending on your persona, whether or not you're a cyber threat intelligence person, or whether or not you may be law enforcement, you'll be interested in preserving the information. Now, I think it goes without saying, depending on which of those two personas that you sit under will depend on what you preserve and how you preserve it, right? They're going to be very distinct, and they have very distinct legal avenues of preserving that information. But something that we can all preserve is metadata, right? Who sent what did they send, what time did they send it? Or in the context of certain information, if I went back to being an Intel analyst for a mining company, I might want to start indexing information that I see on, say, mega.nz, which is the file hosting site, which I honestly think nothing ever good comes from mega.nz. So we're going to talk about that. Through the data identification, what we can see on the screen is that recursive loop of activity. So for example, in the case study, we had a person posting a link into a group. And through the entity extraction, I was able to extract that URL. So the first one up on the screen is the first URL. That landed me at a pastebin.com dump. And in that pastebin.com dump was another linkvertise URL. And I'm like, cool, we're playing like musical link resolution here. And then once I resolved that link, that led me to the mega.nz file, or the actual the location that stored the JSON files and that stored the exploit code that I was looking for. Full disclosure, I made this up on the weekend, but it's identical to what I did. Now, you're probably thinking, and remember how I said previously that financially incentivized. I made 33 cents yesterday when I did that. So by clicking 2 links, I made 33 cents. So you think about it from a perspective of a group of adversaries, I'm trying to be professional, a group of adversaries that are out there to make money by selling data. If they post a single link that's behind a linkvertise / monetary gain service, not only is the destination obfuscated, big tick for their perceived OPSEC, right? They're also making some extra money. So they've probably paid to allow you to go into the group, which then gives you the information that you want or that the adversaries are trying to share. And then they're copping you a second time by clicking on links. And if you click on a link, it's one of those, like, you're on Candy Crush, right? And you're like, yes, I'm out of lives, and your wife has gone to bed and can't send you lives, and so you watch a 10-second ad. Maybe that's just me, and I'm showing you what I do in my spare time. That's the exact equivalent of what's going on here. So, what can we do? How can we threat hunt? What intelligence value does it have? The very, very top, and again, apologies if it's a bit blurry, I've highlighted a little red box around a string of numbers, or an integer of numbers if you want to be specific. But what you've got is a user ID. And all linkvertise and all monetary gain websites will generally have the user ID of the person creating the link. So that for me is lead number 1, right? I can take that and I can do other open source intelligence gathering. Go out and see which of those websites, like URL Scan and Virus Total or Census or any, and I'm literally not just throwing these out because they're here presently. I use them not on a daily, but on a weekly. Go out and collect that information and see how many times have we seen at least the prefix of this link, because the last component is going to be different. Can I even, oh yeah, I can. So up here, the last prefix is the actual link identifier, right? So the second piece to this is once you've gotten through there, what do you do with the mega.nz link? And I should have put a meme of where old mate's sweating and there's 2 buttons and he's not sure which one to click, because that's kind of me. And so I went the ethical terms of service abuse route. So I automated what you're seeing here for the purpose of the research. So I wouldn't have to go and click links and watch ads. Is that against linkvertise's terms of service? Probably. Was it done for ethical reasons? Absolutely. And so what you've got is mega.nz. Now, what I found over a very short period of time, so 90 days out of the almost 6 months that I've been doing the research, was nearly 5,000 valid mega.nz links that contained information over that period of time. And these were links that were either shared directly as mega.nz/folder/decryption key, or they were identified and resolved through linkvertise, through paste bin dumps, and whatever else. Out of those near 5,000 individual links, so these are unique deduplicated links, I was able to index nearly 101 terabytes of information without even opening the link. And I was able to do that by using an undocumented API in the Mega SDK. And that would allow me to return the metadata of information of a mega.nz link. And so I was able to then go out and identify the biggest types of data. So for example, here, video files. So movies, videos, whatever it might be. Zip files. What I found was just after reading metadata, so names, folders, sizes, some hash files, I was able to identify that somebody was sharing car map data. So they didn't want to go to Audi and pay to get their GPS updated, so they were sharing the update files. I mean, it is 2026 and we've all got CarPlay, but hey, that's each to their own. Maybe they don't in Romania. And after another 90 days, 71% of all of those links were still available as of last week. So only 29% of those had been taken offline by Mega. And the reason I talk about this is because I want to go through and trace the messages back to its origin. So doing forward chain analysis as an example. So what that is every time a message is sent in Telegram, you could forward that message to somebody else or to another group. And from there, I can go back and resolve it and resolve the origin of that message. So if you were to forward a message to me from another location, I can see all of those hops through the message data. So I can start to build up a graph of, say, amplification data, or in the case of some of those disinformation campaigns, the coordinated inauthentic behavior graphs, i.e. information that's been disseminated against a particular person or persons. And what that looks like, and based on 11 individual channels that I was tracking during this time, I was able to see at different periods of time, Telegram and people sending messages and forwarding messages on Telegram. So what we ended up seeing is once it started off with a single message and we were able to track that back to its origin, but then do forward chain to identify, well, based on the repository of information and intelligence that I have, where else did I see that message, right? And in the red, that on a 3-day period, that exact same URL was shared almost 17,000 times. And so I went, well, that's a bit weird, went into that group, and that was just a group sharing group. So literally you go in there and people are just sharing links to other groups and to other content on social media platforms. I'm a visual guy, so I love graphs and little dots and things. I know that you probably can't grasp the nature of it based on that alone, but the yellow dots are groups or channels that my account was monitoring, right? The blue dots were all of the individual sources, so groups and channels and other individuals that I was not connected with, but I could join for free, basically. So in such a short period of time, I identified 181,000 forwarded messages in I think it was 30 days. And of that, there was 5,770 unique sources that I could go into, basically. So you get that propagation effect. So it's pretty wild. Now, other uses with the same 3 small pieces of information are activity mapping. So this example that I've got is of an activity heat map, and this is of every single Telegram post, in a 90-day window, so there are about just under 800,000 individual posts. This tells me that people have day jobs, because the biggest common, well, I guess the common denominator here, or the biggest anomaly, was everybody's posting more on a Sunday or on a Saturday, over in America, right? So people are posting on the weekends. Yes, okay, there is definitely activity being posted on, normal days, Mondays and Tuesdays, but the predominant activity is occurring on a weekend. So people have day jobs and they're doing this for financial gain. So not only can you activity map from a user and a group and a channel perspective, but you can also start mapping out content and message amplification. So when I say amplification, that's a person sharing a video or a file in Telegram that is then seen to be forwarded to other groups, either ones that are publicly available that you could join, or ones in your existing Intel repository. And so all of those orange dots are what we like to call the republishers. And so these are people that have forwarded the same content based on the content's unique ID to other individuals, right? The big one from a cyber threat intel perspective, so it's all good to know how your data goes and where your data flows, but it's how can we visualize it and do something constructive with it? And that's through URL or entity clusters. So any of those entities that I spoke about, those can all be used to build up entity clusters. And so what we've got, those big blue dots are domains from URLs that were seen to be shared in all of those smaller sources. And this was a very short period of time. And so we can start visually building out, okay, there's actually a campaign happening over here. Or all of a sudden, we only saw domainx.com pop up yesterday, and all of a sudden we're seeing it across all of our intelligence, all of the different groups that we've identified within our repository. And so with that, some very basic numbers around content moderation on Telegram. They need to do more. And I will leave you with a parting quote, which is from Wall Street back in 1987. The most valuable commodity I know of is information. I couldn't agree. And before I wrap up, I promised to provide a tool. And so everything that I've demonstrated and the tooling that I built based on the research will be publicly available on GitHub tonight. And with that, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you from Ozza for coming and presenting. That was amazing.
Thank you so much. Cheers. And for those, those that want to ask questions, I probably should have given you time. I'll be at the bar at the front in about 10 minutes. Come and have a beer.
Yeah, we don't really have time for questions, and they're just about to kick us out so they can reorganize the room, and we'll be coming back around 4 o'clock for the after the afternoon tea. So, yeah, hit you up at the bar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.